तवगतामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं शरवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गणन्ति भूरिराज. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone, to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on the chapter with the devotees at Dakshineswar Part 2, page 342, and the date is Sunday, December 16th, 1883. And you may remember that this is part of M's long stay at Dakshineswar with Sri Ramakrishna. During this break, that it would be more or less the Christmas break at that time. Sri Ramakrishna was seated with M on the semicircular porch of his room at about 10 o'clock in the morning. The fragrance of gardenias, jasmines, oleanders, roses, and other flowers filled the air. The master was singing, looking at M. Thou must save me, sweetest mother. Unto thee I come for refuge, helpless as a bird imprisoned in a cage. I have done unnumbered wrongs, and aimlessly I roam about, misled by Maya's spell, bereft of wisdom's light, comfortless as a mother cow whose calf has wandered far away. Master. But why? Why should I live like a bird imprisoned in a cage? Fie, for shame. As the master said these words, he went into an ecstatic mood. His body became motionless and his mind stopped functioning. Tears streamed down his cheeks. After a while he said, O mother, make me like Sita, completely forgetful of everything, body and limbs, totally unconscious of hands, feet, and sense organs, only the one thought in her mind, where is Rama? Now, the song is about the Divine Mother. So what happened? Where did the Sita come in? This is very interesting. We know this phenomenon of uddipana, that was very prominent in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, that something would trigger something in his mind, some words or something. Here, my feeling is that this line, helpless as a bird imprisoned in a cage, reminded him of Sita when she was captured by Ravana, and she had to live almost as if in a cage, as if in a prison. And Sri Ramakrishna used to look upon Holy Mother as Sita sometimes, and he would think of her being stuck in the Nahabad. Of course, she was bound there just by her own modesty, that she didn't like to go out. It wasn't any forced the bondage, but anyhow, that long hours of the day she wouldn't go out because she didn't like other people to see her and everything. So it was almost as if imprisoned in a cage. So to me, it seems very clear that this one line, helpless as a bird imprisoned in a cage, somehow awakened. Usually something else awakens it. Here's Sri Ramakrishna. He's awakening this in himself by himself singing the song. Usually someone else will sing a song or he'll see something else, but he himself is singing the song. And then he goes into that mood. After a while, he said, "Oh, mother, make me like Sita, completely forgetful of everything. Body and limbs, totally unconscious of hands, feet, and sense organs, only the one thought in her mind, where is Rama?" Then M, to himself, was the master inspired by the ideal of Sita to teach M the yearning that a devotee should feel for God? Sita's very life was centered in Rama, completely absorbed in the thought of Rama. Sita forgot even the body, which is so dear to all. one of the very important visions that Sri Ramakrishna had, or realizations, was of Sita. Important because Sri Ramakrishna says that this was a different type of vision for him. Most of his visions, he'll be unconscious of the outer world. But this one time when he was near the Panchavati, and he saw on the path, he saw a very beautiful woman dressed in a sari walking towards him, very majestic looking and calm and peaceful. And he's wondering, who is this woman and where did she come from? And then he says he saw a monkey jump out of the tree and roll on the ground in front of her. And then he said, this is Sita. So he said that this was the first time that he had a vision with eyes open, seeing everything else. So he's seeing the trees and the flowers and the buildings, everything. But superimposed on all of that, he had this vision of Sita walking. So that was a little bit different type of vision. There was a book that was written many years ago by Swami Yogeshanandaji. Swami Yogeshanandaji, one of our American monks, he wrote some nice books, that Six-Lighted Windows and some other things. This was called The Visions of Sri Ramakrishna. And he classifies them according to which ones were with eyes open and which ones were with eyes closed. Because Thakur had other visions like this, with our eyes open. We could say almost that whole Ram Lala experience was like that. He's seeing everything else, but he's seeing the baby Rama at the same time. At the same time, he's seeing the actual physical brass, the image, but still seeing the real baby Rama with eyes open. So he had these two different types of visions. And the other interesting thing about that is that he noticed the bangles that Sita was wearing. It's called a diamond cut. It's a certain style of the bangle. And when he had the bangles made for Holy Mother, he had them made according to that style. So Thakur looked upon Holy Mother in so many different ways, as giver of wisdom, Saraswati, as the goddess of wealth, Saraswati.
Didn't Holy Mother herself said one time in an unguarded moment, at Rameshwaram,
I'll tell that story. Yes.
she said, it's still there, what I made.
Yes. Yeah, the question was about Holy Mother's experience in Rameshwaram. And this is also a very beautiful incident in her life. When she went there, she was given very special privileges, partly because she was looked upon as the guru of Swami Vivekananda, who was well known to the Maharaja of Ramnath, who was in charge of the Rameshwaran temple. So she was able to go into the inner shrine. They have a shrine with what's supposed to be the original. It's a kind of sandstone, and it's covered. It's covered with some golden sheets, something like that. And the inside is the one. It's some sandstone or something, but it's supposed to have been the one that Sita herself made on the seashore out of sand. So she had that privilege of being able to worship that, which is not normally done. And she went into a kind of an ecstatic mood, and she was asked what she thought about it. She said, "It's just as it is when I made it." So something like that. Not once. Second time when she went back to Urbodhan house, she also made a similar comment like that. And it was Golab Ma, I think, was there. And she said, "Oh, mother, what did you say?" And she said, "Oh, nothing. Something just escaped my lips and everything." Now, how do we understand that? This is a very interesting question. How do we understand that? Was she really Sita in the previous lifetime and she remembered that that whole incident is 100% true? If Thakur is Rama, then it has to be. Do we have to understand it that way? I have a different explanation because this is a Ramayana story. What if we take it as literature and poetry? We can do that. My other way of understanding this is that Holy Mother was so identified. There's a type of avesha, there's a type of spiritual experience where one becomes so identified with the object of worship that one feels to be one with. So she felt that oneness with Sita, whether it was actually a memory of an experience that she had how many eons earlier or something. If it's the other way, it equally shows her divine nature and her pure nature, that you could feel such a sense of oneness with the Sita, the mind would be so merged. And because we talked about this earlier, that one very important element of this dualistic worship with the abhava and attitude is that one identifies with the worshiper and not with the object of worship. So to worship Rama, one identifies with Sita that way. So this is another for people who say that uh, I don't really believe this. All this Ramayana, did you really remember it? They can dismiss it and say that people made up the story. Or we can say, no, there's another way of looking at it that shows that tremendous purity of mind and heart and everything. Yeah. Yeah, and
Some
then
other time she also identified herself as Kali, right?
so many different times, not just identify, almost manifested that terrible form of Mother Kali. Yeah, and when the nephew, yeah, Shibu insisted, "Tell me who you are." People say you're Kali. Then finally, she had to say yes. So, in different moods, she said different things at different times, and again, Thakur looked upon her with all different aspects. Sometimes it's Sita, sometimes Lakshmi. He used to say she loves her jewelry. Why shouldn't she? She's Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. Anyhow, these all point to this the divine nature. Of course, we can say everyone has a divine nature, but there's a perfect purity of nature of the Holy Mother that she could become so uh, lost in that worship of Rama to feel herself as Sita. Now, is it possible that this was an incident and she remembered it? Of course, it's possible. But it's just another way, if we want to look at it from a different angle, another way of looking at that how to explain that incident. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Mr. Mukherjee, a relative of Prankrishna, arrived in the company of a Brahmin well versed in the scriptures. Mukherjee, I am very happy to meet you, sir. Master, God dwells in all beings. He is the gold in all. In some places, it is more clearly manifest than in others. God dwells in the worldly minded, no doubt, but he is hidden there like gold under deep layers of clay. This is always a question that people ask. Uh, how do we say that God dwells in people who are so filled with tamas and so evil in their nature, and all they want to do is harm other people and everything? This idea of the coverings, that some of the lampshade is so dark that hardly any light shines through it all. That doesn't mean the light isn't there. So this is one way of understanding. Uh, it's not even that the light is greater in one or lesser in another. There's a light; it's the one source light, that one light of the sun. It shines more brightly in some. It's hidden more in others. This is the only distinction. But there in all, that's why Thakur said, God dwells in all beings. Mukherjee, sir, what is the difference between worldly and otherworldly things? Master. Now he's going to give an answer that's going to, at first, we'll wonder, oh, he didn't answer the question. But if we think about it, we'll see he's answering the question a couple questions in advance. That he knows what's in the mind of this Mukherjee. While striving for the realization of God, the aspirant has to practice renunciation, applying the logic of neti neti, not this, not this. Now, this neti neti requires us to look upon things as uh, we can say worldly and otherworldly, or we can say permanent and transient. We can say Sat, Asat, but to break things into these two different categories. So the question was, what is the difference between worldly and otherworldly things? Thakur is going to explain that we have to focus on the difference at the beginning, and then later at the end, we can see the common feature of them. So while striving, at the time of sadhana, while striving for the realization of God, the aspirant has to practice renunciation. And this is not renunciation as we usually think of it. This is really discrimination. That trying to decide what is real and what is unreal, what is permanent. So it's a kind of rejection. You can say, "We'll reject that which is not real." If someone is really taking to monastic life, then they'll actually renounce it. If worldly life is unreal, then they'll give up. If it's transient, they'll give it up. But otherwise, we can just do this as a intellectual or using our viveka, discrimination, this vichara, this path of vichara, we can say. So, while striving for the realization of God, the aspirant has to practice renunciation, applying the logic of neti, neti, not this, not this. So we have two ways of doing this. One is external, that anything that's transitory, anything that's changing, anything that's composed of parts has to fall under the category of asat. We can do it internally, looking for that real I, the Atman, that anything that is, again, transitory, changing, or anything that's the object of consciousness, anything with different ways of doing it, then we reject it from the point of view of we saying that it's not the self, or it's not Brahman, something like that. But now this is the thing. After attaining the vision of God, he realizes that God alone has become all things. So this is that vijnana state. So for Sri Ramakrishna, this sarvam kalividam brahma takes on greater importance, I feel, for him than it does in Advaita Vedanta in general. The Mahavakyas, if we look at the four Mahavakyas, they all point to the oneness of the self in Brahman, or Brahman is pure consciousness, something like that. They don't really talk about this external universe. What is it in reality? Shankaracharya, see, we talk about these Mahavakyas, four great statements of the Upanishads. Who picked them, these four statements? If we look at the formation of the Dashanami Sampradaya, the monastic order of Shankaracharya that he started, we'll see that he broke everything down. There are four different mutts. Each one will have two or three underneath them, and each of these four will have its own Veda, its own Mahavakya, other things like that. So at least in that case, it seems like he chose them. These Mahavakyas were chosen by Shankaracharya. Other traditions will have different types of Mahavakyas. It's not like in the Upanishads, this is a red-line edition. You read them and then you'll see, oh, this is a Mahavakya. We know it that way. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma could have chosen that. Is very important. But more emphasis is put in the other direction. For Sri Ramakrishna, equal emphasis is put on this, and maybe more, because this is the state of vijnana for him. That after having that realization, so some people will say that he contradicts Shankaracharya, that Shankaracharya is saying this world is unreal. Thakur says, I don't like to call this world unreal. It is not the case that Sri Ramakrishna recognizes the importance of this neti, but he says that this is the way that we get to that realization, that we can separate and get to that ultimate reality. And what are we separating? We're really just getting rid of name and form. We're separating that. We get to that reality. Then we see everything as a manifestation of that same reality. So I don't really feel that there's any essential difference. A difference in emphasis maybe. That Shankaracharya talked more about This attitude that the jnani takes in order to have that highest realization. After realization, the jnana may also say everything seems like a dream to me. That may also be. The state of jnana is different for the jnani and different for the bhakta. The bhakta will see everything as a manifestation of Divine Mother or have some relationship again. And Thakur says that Vijnani, following the path of Jnana Yoga, has the eye of knowledge. So that may be a little bit different. He can also say, I see Brahman shining everywhere. I can see everything as a manifestation of the divine. So it doesn't have to be simply one thing. It can be all different types of ways that Vijnana manifests itself after this realization. Yes.
Are these the extractions from Upanishad?
The Mahavakyas are all statements that we find in the Upanishads, and the four Mahavakyas, each one is taken from one of the four Vedas. So this is another way of looking at it. Each of the different mats of the Shankaracharya tradition falls under one of the four Vedas and one of the four Mahavakyas, and so it's the way he established everything.
In some sects, there are more than 2 sets of Mahavakyas. Aham Brahmasmi and Tattvamasi are common, but some people have Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma in place of Prajnanam Brahma.
There may be different traditions. This is why I say it's not written in stone, these Mahavakyas. And I think, I may be wrong, but I think there may be other Vedantic traditions outside of Advaita Vedanta that will have different ones that they'll consider Mahavakyas. Ayamatma Brahma? So, yes, that may be. And you know that the M used this term Mahavakya for statements that Thakur made. He had a list of things that he considered Thakur's Mahavakyas that way. At one time, Rama was overpowered by the spirit of renunciation. See, this one line, bird imprisoned in a cage. Now Thakur's whole mind is on Sita and now Rama and everything, Ramayana. That's how that Udipana worked in his mind. At one time, Rama was overpowered by the spirit of renunciation. Dasharatha, worried at this, went to the sage Vasishtha and begged him to persuade Rama not to give up the world. The sage came to Rama and found him in a gloomy mood. The fire of intense renunciation had been raging in the prince's mind. Vasishtha said, Rama, why should you renounce the world? Is the world outside God? Reason with me. Now, this is another type. We have our neti, we have iti. This is a path, we don't hear about this. This is a way that at the very beginning, that we try to see everything as a manifestation of the divine. We try to tell ourselves, see God dwelling in everything, see everything as manifestation of the divine. Don't make this distinction that something belongs to Brahman, something is outside of Brahman. Don't make that type of distinction, that from the very outset, we accept everything. Thakur liked that. He liked that point of view.
Hari Maharaj also, on the last day of his life,
Swami Turiyananda, who was a great Advaitin, at the very end of his life, last day or to the end of his life, he said, Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam. Brahman is world and the world is real. From that point of view, it's not contradicting this Jagat Mithya. Jagat Mithya is from the point of view that it's changeful. If we look at the ocean and we look at the wave, if we understand that the wave is the ocean, there's no distinction, then it's real. If we think it's something separate, and but there's substance to it, it's water, but the name and the form are constantly changing, then we can dismiss it that it's unreal. If we don't know that beneath the surface there's actually fathoms of water, we only see that surface area. So just different ways of looking at it, different points of view. So Vashishta said, Rama, why should you renounce the world? Is the world outside God? Reason with me. Rama realized that the world had evolved from the supreme Brahman, so he said nothing. Now, I just want to look at the language that Thakur uses here, that the world has evolved from the supreme Brahman. Sometimes he'll say that Brahman itself has become the universe. Sometimes Divine Mother has become the universe. So he's not worried about somebody making a philosophy out of all of this. According to his mood and his feeling and the type of spiritual attitude he has at that time, then he'll explain things in different ways. People object. We say, how can Brahman become this world? How does it become this world? Not like the way milk becomes butter or yogurt. The Brahman doesn't transform itself, and yet through Maya, or apparently there's no other explanation that's given in Vedanta. Sankhya, of course, will say that there's this avyakta, that there's a primal matter and nature and everything, but Vedanta will have to trace everything back to Brahman. Okay, then Thakur continues. Buttermilk is made from the same substance as butter. So that which emerges, this is actually one of the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. We can look at the three schools of Vedanta in terms of the cause and effect relationship. So the dualist will say that the effect comes out of the cause. The qualified non-dualist says that the cause itself becomes the effect. And the Advaitin says that there's no difference. That it's just an apparent difference between the effect and the cause, that they're really one and the same. So the Brahman is really not different from the universe, or this Brahman is transforming itself into the universe, or the universe comes out of Brahman. Three different ways of looking at this cause and effect idea. So Thakur is emphasizing this idea that even if we say that this world is just name and form and constantly changing and everything, what is the substance of it? What is the substance? And if we take, say we take water and it freezes into blocks of ice, and Thakur likes that illustration. The blocks of ice are water. There's nothing we can say that it has a different shape and a different form, and we can give it a different name and everything, but ultimately it's water. There's no distinction whatsoever that way, once we eliminate that name and form. So but the distinction is an important distinction because we get fooled by the name and the form. And we think of things as separate and distinct. We lose that sense of oneness. So we have to, in the beginning, this in 1880, we have to make that distinction. It's at least according to this Vichara Marga. So buttermilk is made from the same substance as butter. One who realizes this knows that butter goes with buttermilk and buttermilk with butter. After separating the butter with great effort, that is to say, after attaining Brahmajnana, you will realize that as long as butter exists, buttermilk also must exist. Wherever there is butter, there must be buttermilk as well. As long as one feels that Brahman exists, one must also be aware that the universe, living beings, and the 24 cosmic principles exist as well. Now, this is again that Vijnana state. The Jnana state up on the roof, if we want to say Nirvikalpa Samadhi state, nothing else exists at that time for that individual. Nothing else exists at that time. So Thakur is talking about is the state of the Jivan Mukta, someone who's living in the world after attaining that knowledge. That person lives in a world where everything is Brahman, everything is divine, everything is manifestation of Mother, seeing Mother everywhere. That'll be that ecstatic type of existence that the lower Brahman will have. What Brahman is cannot be described in words. everything has been polluted, like food that has touched the tongue. That is, everything has been described in words, uchishtam. But no one has been able to describe Brahman. It is therefore unpolluted. I said this to Vidyasagar, and he was delighted. So the idea, this of uchishta, if something touches the tongue, even if your fingers touch your tongue and you touch it to something else, then you won't let anybody else have it. It's been polluted somehow. So words, the word touches the tongue. Right? If we explain something using words, it's touched the tongue. So it becomes uchishta that way. But since Brahman can be explained, then the words will never come to the mouth, to the tongue. So this another way of just saying that it can't be explained. But the knowledge of Brahman cannot be realized if the aspirant is worldly minded, even in the slightest degree. Now, we get the crux of the matter. Now, we may say that if someone has brilliant intelligence and the ability to discriminate and to understand these philosophical principles, very subtle teachings, subtle ideas, that why won't they be able to have that highest realization? Now we find out that it goes beyond that level of mind, that it has to go beyond that. This vichara, this is just to set the stage so that the mind can go beyond to some higher state that requires this perfect purity of mind and purity of heart. So it's not just a question of intelligence. There'll be many great, highly realized souls who won't be able to go through all of this Vedantic philosophy and everything. And it doesn't matter for them. They've had that type of realization. And this worldliness in the mind pulls it down, and it causes these attachments, and attachment automatically brings false identification with the body and the mind. It automatically does it. So he says, but the knowledge of Brahman cannot be realized if the aspirant is worldly minded, even in the slightest degree. He succeeds in acquiring this knowledge only when his mind is totally free from lust and gold. Parvati once said to her father, "Father, seek the company of a holy man if you want the knowledge of Brahman." So why the company of holy men? This is the best way to raise that level of mind. When we see these great souls who don't have that attachment to worldliness, and then that helps us shake off our own attachment. Addressing Mr. Mukherjee, Sri Ramakrishna said, "You are rich and still you call on God. That is very good indeed." It is said in the Gita that those who fall from the path of yoga are born in their next birth as devotees of God in rich families. We have two different types. There's yoga brashta, that born into a good, prosperous family, righteous family and everything. But those who are really, really high, they may be born in a very poor family, but of great yogis, where renunciation will be natural for them. Mr. Mukherjee quoted the line from the Gita. Master, God, if he so desires, can keep a jnani in the world too. So this for jnani, what is in the world and outside of the world? This is what Vashishta was telling Rama. Who is not in the world? What it means is that he may continue with his job and with his family situation and everything. That's all. Everybody's in the world. They like to point to this Nisargadatta. I don't know if he was really a realized soul or not, but he remained as a bidi salesman. He had that's what he did. He had a little shop. He wasn't a wealthy person, anything. So after his so-called realization, whether he had it or not, I don't know. He still kept at that shop, but people would come and sit, and he would give these kind of talks and things. They would record them and everything. There's some Zen expression. Before realization, I chopped wood and carried water. And before nirvana or something. And then after nirvana, I chopped wood and carried water. Something like that. Yeah, it's like Thakur says that the clerk who gets sent to jail, when he comes out, what will he do? Will he just go dancing in the street? He'll go back to being a clerk. That's what he was. So even after realization, but it's not necessary. This in Gita, this is very clear. The realized soul can continue to work or not continue to work. Nothing gained by working, nothing lost by not working. But generally, for the welfare of others, to set an example, maybe inspired by Divine Mother, that generally we find that everything they do is for the welfare of the world. Master. So God, if he so desires, can keep a jnani in the world too. The world and all living beings have been created by his will. Now here I would prefer her will. In Bengali we can't distinguish what's in Thakur's mind when he's saying this. Probably, this is my guess, what's in his mind is Divine Mother. Because most of the songs and everything, most of the songs will be to the Divine Mother when he talks about this idea of will. So the world and all living beings have been created by his or her will. But he or she is self-willed. What's the Bengali? Ichamoyi? Ichamoyi, so that means she. Yeah. This is a little problem with translating the Bengali, because we have to choose between he or she, or either he/she or they. These pronouns are very problematic nowadays. Mukherjee with a smile. How can God have any will? Does he lack anything? All right, now this is the difference between somebody who has a little bit of intellectual capacity and understanding that Brahman is perfect and pure, and Brahman is pure consciousness. There's no personality within Brahman. That will means that there's some lack of something, and how can this possibly take place within Brahman? These are all very legitimate questions for the philosophers. And Sri Ramakrishna is talking from the point of view of the Divine Mother, which includes this idea of this inscrutable Maya. And how do we go from this nariha, this actionless, niskriya, this Brahman that doesn't do anything, to this created universe? Does it just happen on its own? This idea of will is not so much that the way we have will, I want it this way or that way, but Shakti, that there has to be some power associated with the Brahman, one of the key teachings of Thakur, in order to explain. Now, why is it the way that it is, this world? It could have been anyway. Huh? People could have had ears on their knees and noses on the top of their heads. It didn't have to be exactly this way. Why did it turn out this way? We can't say. We can't say. So we say willful, just the sweet will. It's not a scientific or even philosophical answer. It's a spiritual attitude that we take. This is how we get to this idea of lila. Lila and Maya both are recognition of our inability to come up with some foolproof scientific philosophical explanation of things.
Madness with method.
There's a method to your madness, or a madness to the method. one of the two. Yeah. Who could have created this world but my mad mother Kali? That's the idea. It's such a crazy world like this. And why is it the way that it is? Could have been any way. We can say, because everything was in the Vedas. Okay. If you like that answer, it's not a very foolproof answer. How many people will accept that? Or even Plato will say there are all these divine ideas. These have to exist first, and then they can manifest. but it didn't have to be exactly like that. Could have been any. So we don't know. So we talk about this Divine Mother being willful, out of play, lila, or just out of maya. We can't say exactly. But those who want to preserve the purity of Brahman, they'll also say Brahman is perfect and lack nothing. So where would that desire to create come from? And yet in the Upanishads, we see Brahman looked around and thought, may I become many, Bhusyama. He felt lonely. There's allegory. There's allegory because we can't explain any of these things. So Thakur, master, with a smile, what's wrong in that? So he's not trying to say that your explanation there are flaws in it or anything, but look at it from this other point of view. What's wrong with saying that? We don't know exactly how it takes place. That you have a dream. Why did you have that dream? You don't know. It just kind of emerged from the dreamer. Was it the will of the dreamer? Not exactly that the dreamer thought, let me have this particular dream, but it had to emerge from the mind of the dreamer. There had to be some Shakti at play, something causing it. Huh? So why not say any harm with that? To say the Divine Mother is willful, this is playful. So what's wrong in that? Water is water, whether it is still or in waves. Now, still, when water is still, Thakur says this is Nirguna Brahman. When it's in waves, this is Saguna Brahman. The same. They're not two separate things. This when it's still, that means the Shakti is there, but it's not active. It's dormant. And when in waves, the Shakti is active. That's the only difference. But the same reality. One and the same reality. And not that Brahman is sitting here and Ishwar is sitting there, and Brahman says to Ishwara, now you create the world. And not like that. I like to think of it a relationship between the sleeper and the dreamer. Are they two different people? I go to sleep, I have a dream, the same I. Same. So the snake is a snake, whether it is coiled up, motionless, or wriggles along. A man is the same man, whether sitting still or engaged in action. How can you eliminate from the reality the universe and its living beings? If you do that, it will lack its full weight. It's very one of Thakur's favorite illustrations. You cannot find out the total weight of the bell fruit if you eliminate the seeds and shell. Okay, now we've come across this illustration many times. That we know what a bell fruit is like. It looks a little bit like our butternut squash, something like that, maybe. Then it has a hard outer shell, and it'll have the flesh inside, and then inside of that will be the seeds. If we want to make sherbet out of it, we have to remove the shell, and we have to remove the seeds. They're non-essential to making the drink or to eating. The flesh is what we want. So that's the real thing. Now, Thakur is saying that if we take that, we discard all the others, and we weigh that. We actually weigh it on a scale. Then we're not getting the full weight of the. If we weigh it before we take off the outside and the inside, say it weighs 2 pounds, and afterwards say it weighs half a pound. We're not getting the full weight. Now, what does this mean? This is very often taken as the illustration of Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. Now, the idea there is that Brahman is one, but there are internal distinctions. That Brahman is one, but qualified, Vishishta, qualified by Jagat and Jiva. And the real distinction here is that there are many seeds inside of a bell fruit. In Advaita Vedanta, the individual jivas are all reflections of that one reality. They don't have any real independent existence on their own. According to the dualistic schools and the Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta, that they are distinct. They have some distinct reality, like the seeds inside the bell fruit, something like that. Now, Thakur likes this illustration Does that mean that he understood the jiva to be something real and permanent and separate from others? I don't think so. I understand this in a slightly different way, that I understand this from an experiential point of view. That means that if we eliminate this universe and living beings as being either just name and form, non-Brahman, or really the same Brahman, just name and form, then we're not getting the full experience of things. In the Upanishads and Vedanta in general, we have several different types of illustrations. One is gold. So we have objects made of gold, right? And what is the value of a gold bracelet or a gold necklace? In India, India, there's more gold purchased in India than any place in the world, and historically, traditionally, wealth was kept in gold. The people, if they had money, they wouldn't buy paintings and this and that, or real estate or anything. They'd buy gold jewelry for the wife. And the value of it was the weight of it. You could just weigh it. If you got tired of it, you could melt it down and have other things made out of it. So the real value of it wasn't the shape, wasn't the name and form. Whether it's a necklace or whether it's a bracelet or an anklet, didn't make any difference. It was the gold, the quality of the gold and the weight of the gold. Now, if we take another example, suppose we say that we take a great sculptor, take a Michelangelo, and we have a block of stone, and we have this beautiful carving in it. Now, is the value of that beautiful carving the weight of the stone? No. We have two paintings that one, the same canvas, the same frame, the same amount of paint. One is a child does it. The parent will like it and everything. That's the end of it. Another one, it'll be worth $1 million or hundreds of millions of dollars. The weight is the same. Weight is the same. But if we dismiss the beauty of it and the time and effort and the art and the grace and everything, we're not getting the full weight. So we can look upon these as really not contradictory points of view. If we take it literally, Ramanuja and Shankaracharya, they have different points of view. It's both have merits and both have demerits, but they're different. They contradict each other. Either there's a reality to the separate jivas, then we run into a lot of problems. Are there many? Are they infinite number? Do we get rid of them? Or is it just different reflections? There's a difference in those different points of view. But if we take it this way, experiential, then we say there's no problem with that. And this idea of weight, the classic example that we get, or classic verse, the mantra, it says Purnamada Purnamidam, that if we eliminate this entire external universe from Brahman itself, the weight doesn't change. There's another way of saying that we have the whole ocean. If all of the waves disappear, does the ocean become lighter? The weight will be the same amount of water. So does that contradict this idea of the weight? We're not getting the full weight. We're not getting the full experience. We're not getting the full appreciation if we don't make a distinction between the beauty of the name and the form. And this name and form, all of this is a vehicle for God to manifest herself, Divine Mother, that way. That then we're cheating ourselves a little bit. If we simply dismiss everything and say, I'll only go, I won't open my eyes, I don't want to see anything, I don't want to get attached to anything, we're not getting the full weight of this universe, this divine play, that way. Metaphysically, we can agree with the non-dualists that you eliminate the name and the form, the weight is the same. You eliminate the waves, the weight is the same. Yeah.
The devotee tries to keep the separation between the Ishtadevata.
Yeah. See, this idea of separation for those who are, say, unenlightened people, this separation is a cause of all sorts of problems. Separation is between one person and another person, one community and another community, between ourselves and God. It causes anxiety, alienation, fear, all sorts of different things. It's this feeling of separation. This idea of separation for the God relay soul is a completely different thing. And Thakur talks about slight ego resting on the surface of the water, like a mark on the water, allowing this relationship between the lover and the beloved. That's all. That type of still feeling oneness. We can feel oneness with everyone, but you remember that incident in the life of Swamiji with Holy Mother, where he said something to her like, "Mother, if I don't want that Brahmajnana, if it means that you'll cease to exist separate from me," something like that, something like that. So, or this story of who was it, with Shukadeva or something, that you give me the Dakshina first, because after the realization you won't see any distinction between the student and the guru and disciple. That'll disappear.
Hanuman also wanted to keep himself separated from Rama. Right?
Yeah, Hanuman had all three attitudes.
Yeah.
He had all three attitudes, but generally the devotee wants to have that relationship, with God. Thakur needed it to live in the world. Otherwise, the mind would just go up. He'd be merged in Brahman, and how long can you stay even for an avatar? How long can they stay in that state before the body falls off? So he had to keep it down a little bit. So this bell fruit, yeah, it's always pointed out, and as this example of Vishishta Advaita Vedanta, and sometimes that Thakur is thought to hold that was his position, philosophical position. I don't think he had a position. He didn't look upon philosophy that way. But I also think that he's talking more in terms, not that we have to accept this world as something permanent, even if it's changing, something permanent, and jivas as all individual. But we're losing something if we don't see this all as the manifestation of the divine. We're losing something. We're not getting the full experience. Here he says the full weight. Brahman itself is unattached. One finds good and bad smells in the air, but the air itself is untainted. This is Gagana Sadrisam. This is when we talk about this Brahman, you remember we talked about Chidakasha and Chittakasha, that these bad smells and things, they can cling to the air molecules and everything, but space is pure. You put a fan there and blow it all out. The space is unchanged. That's a completely different thing. This Akasha and Vayu are very different. In the beginning, the whole concept of ether in Greek mythology was to explain the distance between objects, the empty space between objects. But we understand space differently. It's not just to explain that, because even physical objects are in empty space. There's no distinction whatsoever. So in consciousness, this thought is upheld in consciousness, the way planets are upheld in space. They just kind of float there within that space. Areas where there's nothing, it's the same pure space. Doesn't make any difference. So this consciousness is like that. Whether there's any thought that takes place within it, any good feelings, bad feelings, it's just upheld. It's suspended in that, but it's not affected by that. So he says one finds good and bad smells in the air, but the air itself is untainted. Here really means that space is there. Brahman and Shakti are identical. Now, this is that other issue. This Abheda or Avinna. Are they identical or are they inseparable? It's a very subtle point. Generally, when Thakur says that they're identical, he's talking about the Shakti as Divine Mother. He's really saying that Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman are one and the same. But when he talks about Shakti as the power that belongs to Brahman, then they're inseparable. But if it belongs to it, it's different from it. But inseparable. So that way, abhinna, we can say. So here he says identical. Now, what does the Bengali say? Oh. No. This Brahman and Shakti are identical. Obeyed. Yeah. So sometimes he'll use that language, but this is a way of saying that, say we have an attribute that belongs to a substance, that you can have the color red without a red object, without an object there. And you can't have an object without a color. They're inseparable. But we can make a distinction between the two of them. But if by Shakti we mean Divine Mother, then absolutely identical, just like the dreamer and the sleeper, absolutely identical. So he uses it actually in different times, in different ways. It is the primordial power that has become the world and all living beings. So now we see that this Shakti is Brahman together with the Shakti. Shakti itself can't do anything. If we look at it from that point of view, they have to work together somehow. Mukherjee. Why does one deviate from the path of yoga? So now he's bringing it back to a little bit of a practical question. Master, as the saying goes, this is from a song. In my mother's womb, I was in a state of yoga. Coming into the world, I've eaten its clay. I think of Ram Prasad's song. The midwife has cut one shackle, the navel cord, but how can I cut the shackle of Maya? Maya is nothing but lust and gold. A man attains yoga when he has freed his mind from these two. So most philosophers will say Maya's false identification, Maya's misunderstanding of things. They'll look at it from the point of view of knowledge and ignorance. Thakur is looking at it from this point of view of attachment. They're not completely separate, of course, but this is more important to him, that we need to feel that freedom, that because attachment is what makes us feel small and limited and bound. And all attachment ultimately requires attachment to the body and attachment to ego, all of that. So this is another way of saying the ego itself is Maya. Thakur says many times, ego itself is Maya because it's false. Ego means taking my individuality to be absolute and to perfectly identify with all of my limitations and all of my peculiarities and all of the things that make me feel different from other people. And this is what keeps us bound. The self, the supreme self, is the magnet. The individual self is the needle. Now, if we're going to say the supreme self and the individual self are ultimately one, then we have to understand this higher mind and lower mind, or that divine presence within and the mind seeking to realize its true nature, something like that. The individual self experiences the state of yoga when it is attracted by the supreme self to itself. But the magnet cannot attract the needle if the needle is covered with clay. It can draw the needle only when the clay is removed. The clay of lust and gold must be removed. We have another illustration with this idea of this magnet, that God is a huge magnetic mountain. This world is a very small magnet, but we're close to it. So the pull of a magnet doesn't depend entirely on the force of the magnet, but the distance we are from it. further we are from it, the less it can pull us, attract us. This is why if we walk a little bit there, then it pulls us even more. We take one step, then God will take 10 steps towards us, something like that. So then Mukherjee asks, how can one remove it? That means this attachment. Master. Weep for God with a longing heart. So again, he's not saying discriminate, ask yourself, who am I? Do this Durig Drisha Viveka. I am the witness of all of this. He's not saying any of that. He's saying, weep for God with a longing heart. These, for most people, if we can do it, of course, for most people, this will transform the mind and heart in a far more effective way than any type of reasoning can do. So, and Thakur, he experienced this. This is how he had his realization, through weeping for God. Weep for God with a longing heart. Tears shed for him will wash away the clay. When you have thus freed yourself from impurity, you will be attracted by the magnet. Only then will you attain yoga. Mukherjee, priceless words. Okay, we can stop here. This is a nice conversation, and remember, half of this is for M. This was the time when Sri Ramakrishna really trained up M to be the perfect messenger with regard to recording all of this, and also living in the world as the example of the ideal householder, or half householder, half sannyasi, gurihi sannyasi, that way. So this is all they say scolding the daughter for the sake of the daughter-in-law. So a lot of this is advice to the Mukherjee for the sake of them, something like that. Oops. Okay, we'll close. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanakam Bhaturu Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namah. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. All these chat things.